The coffee was still warm when I found the photos on Julia's phone. Funny how life can pivot on something so mundane, reaching for her charging cable because mine had finally given up the ghost, just like everything else in our 15-year marriage. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I'm Tom Harding, 45, the guy they call when the office printer jams or when someone's laptop decides to update itself into oblivion. Not exactly the hero of anyone's story, especially not my own. At least, that's what I thought until I saw those pictures. Julia had left her phone face up on the kitchen counter, screen still glowing. The notification preview showed just enough, a partial image of black lace against pale skin, and a contact name that made my blood freeze. Brad M. Brad Morrison. Her college boyfriend, the one with the trust fund and the law degree and the kind of jaw that belonged in a cologne commercial. My finger hovered over the phone. 15 years of marriage, and here I was, about to cross a line I'd never imagined crossing. But something in my gut, that same instinct that helped me troubleshoot corrupted hard drives, told me I was already too late for moral boundaries. The photos were worse than I'd imagined, not just the lingerie shots, but the messages that followed. Julia's words, describing in vivid detail what she wanted to do to him, what she missed about him, how she was stuck with a man who fixes computers for a living. I sat there in our kitchen, surrounded by the life we'd built together, the mortgage payments, the shared Netflix account, the coffee maker we'd argued about buying, and felt something cold settle in my chest. When Julia walked in 20 minutes later, her yoga mat slung over her shoulder and that post-workout glow that used to make my heart skip, I was still holding her phone. "Tom? What are you—" She stopped when she saw my face. "If you're jealous, that's on you," she said after I confronted her. Not an apology. Not even an explanation, just that flat, dismissive tone she usually reserved for telemarketers. "Jealous?" I repeated, my voice surprisingly steady. "Julia, you sent naked pictures to your ex-boyfriend." She shrugged, like we were discussing what to have for dinner. "Brad and I have history. We're adults. We can handle a little harmless flirtation." "Harmless?" I held up the phone, scrolling to one of the more explicit messages. "You told him you wanted to. I know what I told him." She snatched the phone from my hands. "And like I said, if you can't handle it, that's your problem." Something shifted in that moment. Not snapped. That would come later. Just a quiet, calculating shift, like a gear clicking into place. "You're right," I said. "It is my problem. I should probably do something about it." Julia laughed, that sharp sound she made when she thought she'd won an argument. "Like what? File for divorce? Good luck explaining to everyone why you couldn't keep your wife satisfied." She walked away, leaving me alone with the wreckage of my assumptions about our marriage. But she'd made one crucial mistake. She assumed I was the same man who'd married her 15 years ago, the guy who fixed other people's problems and ignored his own. I opened my laptop and started typing. Brad Morrison wasn't hard to find on social media. Neither was his fiancée, Amanda Chen, a pediatric nurse with kind eyes and a Facebook profile full of wedding planning posts. Amanda deserved to know what kind of man she was about to marry. And Julia deserved to learn that actions have consequences. I attached the photos to an anonymous email account and hit send before I could second-guess myself. The fallout was spectacular. Amanda's response came within hours, not to me, of course, since I'd sent the photos anonymously, but across every social media platform Brad had ever touched. Her posts were surgical in their precision, detailing not just Brad's infidelity, but Julia's role as the desperate housewife trying to steal someone else's happiness. Within 24 hours, the story had spread through Julia's social circle like a virus. Her best friend Tessa, a yoga instructor who ran a gossip blog on the side, published a blind item that was about as subtle as a brick through a window. Which married PR manager has been sending intimate photos to her college flame, complete with detailed descriptions of her boring husband's inadequacies in bed? I had to admire Tessa's style. She included just enough details to make it obvious without naming names, letting Julia's friends connect the dots themselves. Julia's reaction was predictable. She came home that evening like a hurricane, slamming doors and throwing accusations. "You did this," she hissed, cornering me in my home office. "You ruined everything." "I ruined everything?" I leaned back in my chair, surprised by how calm I felt. "Julia, I didn't send those photos. I didn't write those messages. I didn't cheat on my spouse." "You had no right—" "I had every right. Amanda deserved to know what she was getting into." Julia's face went white, then red. "Brad's career is destroyed. His reputation?" "His reputation as what?" A faithful fiancé? I shook my head. That reputation was already a lie. I just made the truth public. She stared at me like she was seeing me for the first time. Maybe she was. The Tom Harding who'd married her would have suffered in silence, would have blamed himself for not being good enough to keep her faithful. This Tom Harding was done suffering. Over the next few days, I watched Julia's world contract. Friends stopped calling. Her boss at the PR firm started asking pointed questions about her personal conduct, affecting the company's reputation. The yoga studio where she taught part-time suddenly found budget constraints that eliminated her classes. I felt a dark satisfaction watching it unfold, but I knew this was just the beginning. Julia had made it clear she saw me as weak, disposable, a problem to be managed rather than a person to be respected. She had no idea what kind of problem I could actually become. The confrontation I'd been expecting came on a Thursday evening. I was walking to my car after work when Brad Morrison stepped out from behind a pillar in the parking garage. He looked like hell. The cologne commercial jaw was sporting several days of stubble, his usually perfect hair was disheveled, and his expensive suit was wrinkled like he'd slept in it. "You son of a bitch," he said, his voice echoing off the concrete walls. I stopped walking, but didn't back down. "Brad, you look terrible. Rough week? You destroyed my life. I sent some photos to your fiancé. Photos you asked my wife to send. How exactly is that destroying your life?" He stepped closer, and I could smell the alcohol on his breath. "Amanda left me. My partners are talking about removing me from the firm. My reputation... Your reputation was built on a lie." I kept my voice level, professional. The same tone I used when explaining to clients why their computer had crashed. "Amanda had a right to know who she was marrying." "You had no right?" "I had every right. Julia is my wife. Those photos were meant for you, not for me, but once I saw them, they became my problem to solve." Brad's hands clenched into fists. For a moment, I thought he might actually swing at me. Instead, he pulled out his keys and dragged them along the side of my Honda Civic, leaving a jagged scratch in the paint. "There," he said, breathing hard. "Now we're even." I looked at the scratch, then at Brad, then back at the scratch. Something cold and calculating settled in my chest. "No," I said quietly. "Now we're just getting started." I pulled out my phone and took a picture of the damage, making sure to get Brad in the frame. His face went pale as he realized what he'd just done. "That's vandalism, Brad. A misdemeanor in this state. But don't worry, I'm not going to call the police. I'm going to do something much worse." "What?" I smiled, and for the first time in our confrontation, Brad took a step backward. "I'm going to treat you exactly the way you treated my marriage, like it doesn't matter." Brad's vandalism of my car was the catalyst I needed. Not for violence, I'm not that kind of man, but for something far more devastating. Systematic destruction of everything he valued. I started with research. 15 years in tech support had taught me that information is power, and Brad Morrison had left digital footprints everywhere. His law firm's website boasted about his impeccable character and commitment to family values. His LinkedIn profile was full of testimonials from satisfied clients. His Instagram showed a carefully curated life of expensive restaurants and weekend golf trips, all of it built on a foundation of lies. My first move was elegant in its simplicity. I created a detailed timeline of Brad's affair with Julia, complete with screenshots of their messages and photos. Not the explicit ones. I wasn't interested in revenge porn, but the romantic ones, the ones that clearly showed a man planning to cheat on his fiancée. I sent the package to the Bar Association's Ethics Committee. Lawyers are held to higher standards than the rest of us, and adultery might not be illegal, but it sure as hell raised questions about moral character. The second package went to his law firm's biggest client, a family-owned business that prided itself on traditional values. I included a note explaining how Brad had pursued a married woman while engaged to another, questioning whether this was the kind of man they wanted representing their interests. Julia, meanwhile, was dealing with her own consequences. Tessa's blog had attracted the attention of a local gossip columnist who'd started digging into the mystery PR manager mentioned in the blind item. It didn't take long for someone to connect the dots. "Tom, you have to make this stop," Julia said, cornering me in the kitchen one evening. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, and her usually perfect hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. "Make what stop?" "The harassment. The rumors. Someone at work asked me directly if I was the woman in Tessa's blog." "And what did you tell them?" "I denied it, obviously." I nodded thoughtfully. "So you lied to your boss about lying to your husband. That's consistent, I guess." Her face flushed. "This isn't a joke, Tom. My career is on the line." "Your career?" I set down my coffee cup with deliberate care. Julia, 3 weeks ago you told me that if I couldn't handle your affair, that was my problem. Now your affair is becoming everyone's problem, and suddenly you want my help? I made a mistake. You made a choice. Multiple choices. You chose to cheat. You chose to humiliate me. You chose to dismiss my feelings when I confronted you. I stood up, surprised by how calm I felt. Now you're living with the consequences of those choices. What do you want from me? It was a fair question. What did I want? An apology? A promise to change? A return to the marriage we'd had before I discovered her betrayal? The answer surprised me. Nothing, I said. I don't want anything from you anymore. That night, I made a decision that would have seemed impossible a month earlier. I called my sister Karen, a divorce attorney in Chicago, and asked her to recommend someone local. But I wasn't ready to file yet. First, I had some unfinished business with Brad Morrison. The opportunity came sooner than I'd expected. Brad's law firm was hosting a charity gala at the downtown Marriott, one of those black tie affairs where wealthy people congratulate themselves for caring about poor people. Julia had mentioned it weeks earlier, back when she still thought we were going together. I bought a ticket under my own name. If Brad wanted to make this personal, I was happy to oblige. The gala was exactly what I'd expected. Overpriced wine, rubber chicken, and speeches about the importance of giving back. I spotted Brad immediately, working the room in a tuxedo that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. He saw me too. Our eyes met across the crowded ballroom, and I raised my wine glass in a mock toast. His face went white. I waited until he was in the middle of a conversation with a potential client, an elderly woman dripping in diamonds, before making my move. "Excuse me," I said, approaching their table. "Brad Morrison?" He turned, his smile frozen in place. "Yes?" "Tom Harding. We met in a parking garage last week. You keyed my car?" The woman looked between us, confusion evident on her face. The conversations at nearby tables began to quiet as people sensed drama. "I'm sorry," Brad said, his voice tight. "I think you have me confused with someone else." I pulled out my phone and showed him the photo I'd taken. "Honda Civic, license plate 7G4 MNP. You dragged your keys along the driver's side door while you were drunk and angry about your fiancée leaving you." The woman gasped. Other guests were openly staring now. "Sir," Brad said, his voice rising slightly, "you're obviously disturbed. I'm going to have to ask you to leave." "Disturbed?" I laughed, loud enough for half the ballroom to hear. "Brad, you pursued a married woman for months, convinced her to send you explicit photos, and when her husband found out and told your fiancé, you vandalized his car. And I'm the one who's disturbed?" Security was moving toward us now, but the damage was done. Every phone in the room was out, recording. By morning, the video would be on YouTube, Facebook, and probably the local news. Brad's career wasn't just damaged now, it was over. As security escorted me out, I caught sight of Julia near the back of the room. She was staring at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Not anger, not disappointment, but something that looked almost like fear. Good. It was about time she realized who she was really married to. The video of my confrontation with Brad at the charity gala went viral within 48 hours. Not celebrity viral, but local news viral, which was exactly what I'd been hoping for. The headline on the city paper's website read, "Local attorney accused of affair and vandalism at charity event." Brad's law firm released a statement the next day announcing his voluntary leave of absence pending an internal investigation. Translation, he was fired, but they were letting him save face. Julia's reaction was swift and predictable. "You've lost your mind," she said, storming into my home office where I was working on a client's network security issue. "That stunt at the gala. People are talking about us. About me." I didn't look up from my laptop. "Interesting. When you were sending naked photos to your ex-boyfriend, you didn't seem concerned about people talking. But now that there are consequences, suddenly you care about our reputation? This is different." "How?" She struggled for an answer. "It just is." I finally looked at her. Really looked. The woman I'd married 15 years ago had been confident, ambitious, magnetic. The woman standing in my office looked desperate and small. "Julia, do you remember what you told me when I found those photos? Tom, you said if I was jealous, that was on me. You made it clear that my feelings didn't matter, that my humiliation was irrelevant." I closed my laptop and leaned back in my chair. "So, I decided to stop being jealous and start being strategic." "Strategic?" "Brad destroyed my marriage. You helped him, so I destroyed his career, and you're helping me." Her face went pale. "What do you mean?" I pulled up Tessa's blog on my phone and showed her the latest post. "Your best friend published another blind item yesterday. This one includes details about a certain PR manager who's been lying to her boss about her involvement in a public scandal." Julia grabbed the phone, her hands shaking as she read. The post was devastating, describing a woman who'd not only cheated on her husband, but had tried to cover it up by claiming she was being harassed by a delusional spouse. Tessa wouldn't. She's my friend. Was your friend. Past tense. I took the phone back. Turns out Tessa's been documenting your conversations for months. All those times you complained about me, called me boring, said you deserved better, she kept records. Why would she do that? Because her blog gets 10,000 unique visitors a month and scandal sells. You were never her friend, Julia. You were her content. The truth of it hit her like a physical blow. She sank into the chair across from my desk, her face crumpling. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. What happens now? She whispered. Now you learn what I learned 3 weeks ago. That actions have consequences, and some consequences can't be undone. My phone rang before she could respond. The caller ID showed my sister Karen's number. Tom, I got your message about needing a divorce attorney, but before I give you any referrals, I need to ask, are you sure about this? I looked at Julia, sitting in my office like a stranger, and felt nothing but a cold, clean certainty. Yeah, Karen, I'm sure. The divorce papers were filed the next morning. I had them served at Julia's office in front of her colleagues and her boss. It was petty, but after weeks of systematic humiliation, I'd discovered I had a talent for pettiness. Julia's response was to hire the most expensive divorce attorney in the city, a shark named Richard Steinberg, who specialized in taking cheating spouses to the cleaners. He was good. I'll give him that. But he made one crucial mistake. He assumed I was the same weak, passive man Julia had described to him, the kind of man who would roll over and accept whatever settlement they offered. He had no idea what kind of evidence I'd been collecting. The first settlement conference was scheduled for the following Wednesday. Julia and Steinberg arrived confident, expecting to walk away with half of everything we'd built together, plus alimony. Instead, they walked into an ambush. My attorney, a quiet woman named Patricia Wells, laid out our counteroffer with surgical precision. Not only would Julia get nothing beyond what she'd brought into the marriage, but she'd be responsible for half of Brad's legal fees from the Bar Association investigation. On what grounds? Steinberg demanded. Patricia slid a folder across the table. Alienation of affection, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and fraud. Fraud? Mrs. Harding used marital assets, specifically the phone plan and internet service my client pays for, to conduct her affair. She also lied about her whereabouts on multiple occasions, claiming work obligations while actually meeting with Mr. Morrison. That constitutes fraud in the inducement of continued financial support. It was a stretch legally, but it didn't matter. The real weapon wasn't the legal theory, it was the evidence. Patricia opened the folder and began laying out photographs, text messages, credit card statements, and GPS data from Julia's phone. Months of documentation showing not just the affair, but the elaborate deception required to maintain it. Where did you get this? Julia whispered, staring at a photo of her and Brad entering a hotel. Your husband is very good with technology, Patricia said. Much better than you gave him credit for. The settlement conference lasted 6 hours. By the end, Julia had agreed to a division of assets that left her with essentially nothing and a requirement to pay her own legal fees. As we left the building, she grabbed my arm. Tom, please, we can work this out. I made mistakes, but we can fix this. I looked down at her hand on my arm, then back at her face. Julia, 3 weeks ago, you told me that if I couldn't handle your affair, that was my problem. You were right. It was my problem, and I solved it. I walked away, leaving her standing on the courthouse steps, finally understanding what it felt like to be powerless. But I wasn't done yet. There was still one more lesson to teach. The final confrontation came on a Saturday morning in early December. I was in my kitchen, drinking coffee and reading about Brad Morrison's disbarment in the local paper, when someone started pounding on my front door. Through the peephole, I could see Julia and Brad standing on my porch. She looked desperate. He looked dangerous. I opened the door but left the security chain engaged. Tom, we need to talk, Julia said. I don't think we do. Our attorneys are handling the divorce. There's nothing left to discuss. There's plenty to discuss, Brad said, pushing forward. You destroyed my life over some photos. I destroyed your life? I laughed. Brad, you destroyed your own life when you decided to pursue a married woman. I just made sure everyone knew about it. You cost me my career, my reputation, everything I worked for. And what did you cost me? My marriage, my trust, my peace of mind. The difference is, I didn't deserve what you did to me. You deserved everything you got. Brad's face burned with anger and whiskey, his breath reeking through the cracked door. "Open this door," he roared. "No," I said firmly. "Open the goddamn door." Brad threw his shoulder against it, but the security chain held. I pulled out my phone, hitting record. "Brad Morrison, you're drunk and attempting to break into my home. Julia Harding, you're watching and doing nothing. I'm calling the police." "Wait," Julia pleaded. "Tom, please, we just want to talk." "About what?" I asked. "Ending this. The divorce, the humiliation, everything. The divorce is happening. The humiliation was your choice when you cheated. Everything is the consequence of your actions." Brad slammed his fist against the door. "You self-righteous prick. You think you're better than everyone." "I think I'm better than cheaters and vandals. That's a low bar, Brad." I dialed 911, ensuring they heard. "2 people are attempting to break into my home. One's intoxicated and has vandalized my property before." The operator asked for my address, which I gave clearly, letting Brad and Julia hear. "Are you in immediate danger?" I peered through the peephole. Brad paced like a caged beast. Julia stood frozen, realizing the depth of this mess. "I'm safe for now, but they're not leaving." "Officers are en route," the operator confirmed. I hung up, meeting their eyes through the peephole. "Police are 5 minutes out. Leave." "This isn't over," Brad snarled. "Yes, it is." I held up my phone, still recording. "Brad, you're a disbarred attorney with a drinking problem and a vandalism record. Julia, you wrecked our marriage for this man now threatening me. You have no power, no leverage, nothing." Julia's sobs broke, ugly and raw. For a fleeting second, I felt a spark of the love I once had. Then I recalled her flirty photos with her ex, her careless, "If you're jealous, that's on you." The spark died. Police arrived as Brad kicked the door. They cuffed him for public intoxication and attempted breaking and entering. Julia escaped charges but was escorted off with a warning. I handed over my recording and photos of Brad vandalizing my car. By Monday, he'd face more charges. That evening, I sat in my kitchen, sipping a beer, scanning news on my laptop. Brad's arrest was catnip for local media. Fallen lawyer, sordid affair, violent showdown. My phone buzzed, Julia's text. "I'm sorry for all of it." I stared, then deleted it without reply. 3 months later, the divorce finalized. Julia fled to her parents in Ohio. Brad got 90 days in jail and mandatory rehab. I kept the house, the savings, and my dignity. But more than that, I'd changed. For 15 years, I'd fixed others' problems, ignoring mine. I'd been passive, easy to dismiss, not anymore. The old Tom would have suffered silently, blaming himself for Julia's infidelity. This Tom turned their betrayal into their undoing, methodically, relentlessly. I finished my beer, closed the laptop. Snow fell outside, blanketing the city in fresh white, a new beginning. Tomorrow, I'd hunt for a better job, something challenging. Maybe I'd date again when ready. But tonight, I sat in my kitchen, in my house, surrounded by the life I'd fought for and won through sheer will. Julia was right once. Jealousy was on me. But her destruction? That was on her. The next morning, I woke with purpose. I'd spent years as a reliable mechanic, fixing cars, solving problems, but never asking for more. Now, I wanted more. I scrolled job boards, eyeing roles in management, maybe even starting my own shop. The idea sparked something in me, control, ambition, a future I'd define. By noon, I'd sent resumes to 3 companies, each offering better pay and growth. I felt alive, unburdened by the weight of Julia's betrayal or Brad's threats. Their actions had pushed me to reclaim my life, and I was grateful for the clarity. Weeks later, I heard from a friend that Julia was struggling in Ohio, working a dead-end job, cut off from the social circle she'd once prized. Brad's dealership tanked after his arrest made headlines. He was selling used cars at a shady lot, barely scraping by. I didn't gloat. Their downfall wasn't my goal, it was the byproduct of their choices. My goal was freedom, and I'd achieved it. One evening, I met an old friend, Sarah, for coffee. She'd heard about the divorce and reached out concerned. Over lattes, she laughed at my stories of rebuilding, her eyes warm with admiration. "You're different, Tom," she said. "Stronger." I smiled. I had to be. Sarah and I started meeting more. Often, not dating yet, but building something real. No rush, no pressure. Just 2 people connecting, free of lies. 6 months post-divorce, I landed a job managing a high-end auto shop. The pay was double, the work fulfilling. I moved into a new place, smaller but mine, with a view of the city skyline. Every night I watched the lights, feeling not just content but whole. Julia and Brad were footnotes now, their names fading like old newsprint. My story wasn't about them anymore. It was about me, who I'd become, what I'd built, and where I was going. I'd learned to value myself, to fight for what mattered. No one could take that away, not Julia, not Brad, not anyone. As winter deepened, I stood on my balcony watching snow dust the streets below. The past was buried under that clean white layer, and the future stretched open, full of possibility. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. The end, don't forget to hit, like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next story. Write in the comments from which city you are watching.